Hi, and welcome to this edition of the IGF Virtual Roundtable, where we'll be with some industry experts discussing what Latin America is all about. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in Latin America as it has come from a sleeping giant to a second leading market growth in what is online gaming. It is very exciting to be here. As I said, I am Kim Caesar. I'm the president and CEO of Triple Ripple Group. We're an advisory firm that focuses on everything that has to do with executive, either operational or corporate development. And we play roles in either advisory, execution, or board membership. With me, I have in the panel three experts in diverse backgrounds that are and have cemented a place in the Latin American market. So with me I have in the panel three experts that I would like to refer to them to introduce themselves, introduce the company, and basically comment a little bit on how things are developing for each of them in the region. So first and foremost, we have Juan Jose Mantis from Meridian Bet. Juan Jose.
Hi, Kim. Hi, colleagues. Thanks for this opportunity to the organizer. Just roughly, I started in 2008 with the land-based casino industry, with the slot machine business. In the former times, I was living in Germany. And since 2013, I started with the online betting when this was like a baby for us. Most of the operations were in retail. And nowadays, we are operating in 6 countries in the region with some established operations in each of them. I hope we can give you another overview of what is possible, what is not possible, and the difficulties we find here.
Perfect. Thank you, Juan Jose. Thomas, if you will, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Kim. It is a pleasure to be here along with you folks. My name is Thomas. I'm Brazilian. I've been in the industry for about 12 years, mainly B2C as in an operator. I have, along those years, learned a lot, paid my school fees, launched and managed 5 or 6 brands, mainly in Brazil, but also in some other markets, mainly as a consultant. I am looking forward to this discussion, to learning from the gentlemen around me, and looking forward to contributing to the discussion as well. Thank you, iGaming Future, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Thomas. And Jack, if you will, please.
Of course, I'm Jack Smith. I'm the sales director here at Sportingtech. I've now been in the industry for 8 or 9 years. Previously with B2C background, eventually moving across to the B2B side, working with sports data feeds, and moving more recently in the last year, 18 months, into platforms, casinos, and helping our brand expand with operators into the LatAm market. We're currently live in 5 or 6 countries, and we're hoping to expand that. And lastly, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you to the three of you guys. Let's jump right into what is Latin America. Just like from my experience, from my point of view, just like I've been in the market for about 15 years, and I've seen mostly in the retail part of it. And obviously, there's been tremendous growth, tremendous basically innovation in the retail part of it. And I would say over this last 4 or 5 years, obviously, the iGaming has taken effectively a forefront as far as growth and potential and future outlook, to the tunes of where we compare the revenue potential, where we are, where we've been, where we've come from in the retail market. You have different viewpoints, but generally you're looking at maybe a 15 or 20 billion retail market. And then whoever, depends on who you talk with, the online market is probably currently at 2 billion, 3 billion, even 4 or slightly more billion market. So you're looking at a 3, 4, or 5 ratio of growth, right? Obviously, exponentially more on the online part of it. Understanding how this convergence, right, of the online and the offline, what does it mean? How are we cohabitating? Both the industry as a whole, to see that this is growing as effectively and as positively as we want to. I'll start with Thomas, to help us answer. It will give us some perspective into how this is evolving, and basically where do you see it going from here?
Thank you very much, Kim. That's a very, very good question. It's a proper, comprehensive question. Of course, in order to do my best attempt in answering that, I need to try and kind of slice it down to specific markets. So let me start with Brazil now, which is the market where I have most of my experience at. As we know, when it comes to land-based in Brazil, we're very restricted. As it stands, sports betting is deemed or considered legal. However, I'm standing right now in the city of São Paulo, and you barely see any land-based sports betting shops. However, though, if you travel to the northeast parts of the country, Recife, Salvador, Maceió, you see them popping up everywhere. I have an apartment in the city of Maceió in the northeast coast of Brazil, state of Alagoas, beautiful area of Brazil. And you see them sports betting shops popping up everywhere, which is interesting, Kim, because if you look at the mobile penetration in Brazil right now, we're one of the most advanced in terms of mobile penetration in Latin America and the world. Right now, we have more than 75% of the population of Brazil that have access to the web via a mobile device. The lowest percentage of that we see exactly in the northeast part. So that kind of explains it in a way, because perhaps betting business, online betting business, are seeing the Northeast as a very good potential target market. However, for you to establish your presence there, you need to set up shop first in order to then maybe convert your customers over to an online betting experience. However, if you look at the southern and south areas of Brazil, São Paulo, Santa Catarina, and other states, populations seem to have a bit more access to online betting sites, and then it's very seldom. It's much more seldom to see a betting shop in those areas. When it comes to gambling, land-based gambling, as you all know, that's forbidden in Brazil from the 40s. We don't have any sort of land-based legal. I need to make the distinction. We don't have any legal land-based casinos in Brazil. And online betting, online gambling is also considered to be illegal. There's a lot of arguments about this. We can chat about this forever. However, if we stick to what is legal in Brazil at the moment, sports betting, poker, you have a lot of shops in the northeast area of Brazil, and there's so many websites coming into Brazil right now. So I think, going straight to your point, the point of your question, how important it is, the association, the linking of land-based and online, of course, extremely important, especially in a country like Brazil, where people are very much used to going physically to a shop or to a bank to get things done. Of course, if you just quickly look at other markets like Colombia, Peru, Mexico, completely different reality, as those markets are established land-based markets, both from a sports betting perspective and also from a gambling perspective. But that will be my analysis, Kim.
Perfect, and I love it, and I think you made some valid points, and I want to touch on two of them and expand it, to Juan and Jack as well. And one of them being, I would say, culturally, the localization perspective, right? The visual, from a customer, you mentioned that, just you need to establish a retail presence so that you can strategically eventually go into the online, right, and expand in that direction. And effectively, you said, obviously this is true in Brazil as it is in other countries. But from, when we have Sportingtech and when we have Meridian, right, an operator and a B2B, obviously they just said they have very unique perspectives, because each business model offers an opportunity to see specifically what you're seeing, right? So I want to expand it, just like to Jack, to you. I mean, just like, what is your view? What is your perspective on how do you see, just like this that is being mentioned by Thomas?
Yeah, so it actually ties in quite nicely to what Thomas mentioned. So some of the operators we work with are in the regions of Recife, as Thomas mentioned, where it's more heavily retail focused. So for us as a B2B, it's important obviously that we take note of the local market expertise that some of our operators and potential operators that want to onboard with us, their experiences and what they believe is the best fit for them. So if you take, for example, like I said, Recife, where it's heavily retail focused, I think for us, it's kind of how we move people online. And I think if you go back as far as 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when COVID happened, everyone has kind of made this emphasis for digitalization and moving online and creating this almost like armchair experience and convenience factor for players. So you can do everything by your phone now. That obviously comes with huge benefits because it means that you can penetrate the market better. It allows players not to have the need to go to a physical point of sale by using the app online. But you also then obviously you don't want to cannibalize your own business by stopping operators or operators finding the need to close shops because their business then becomes predominantly online. So for us, it's ways in how we cross sell and ensure that both still have a huge importance for the business. So, I mean, I'll take a feature that we use, for example. We have a book a bet feature whereby our operators or players even, are able to go onto the mobile site or onto the desktop site. They can put their bet together. They can book the bet. They'll be given a unique code or a QR code. And then they can take that actually to a physical point of sale and place that bet in cash. And that obviously gives the need where then for an operator to keep some of their retail points of sale open. And as we know as well, across most countries, cash is still king. I think that's a fairly global statement there that people still do like to use cash, even though it's obviously become harder to use in certain parts of the globe.
Perfect. I mean, and I want to just like, and it leads me right into obviously with Juan. I mean, just like you have grown in the region, right? You mentioned you're currently in 6 countries. I'm sure you're looking at expansion as well. I mean, just like how has that evolved? You know, from landing from country 1 now into it's the 6th country and possibly looking into other countries. What are the lessons learned in basically how to cohabitate on the retail and online, and how have you made it successful as you expand?
Well, what a question. When I started in 2012-13, basically the only thing we were speaking was about retail. This is the truth. And the people that was willing to get involved in our business were the land-based casino operators. For sure, you have the big online operators around, but the people, in my opinion, was still not prepared. For me, what changed everything was Corona. Before Corona, I would say LatAm was 10 years behind Europe, but Corona sped up everything to 5, in my opinion. In countries like Mexico, we started with retail inside some land-based casinos. Unfortunately, Colombia, the regulation only allowed the retail just to use it as for deposits and withdrawals, but you cannot make a bet slip in a betting shop. So in Colombia, you have a funny model where you have shops full of computers where the people log in and play there. And I think Peru was one of the leaders to have a proper retail betting model. But again, if you analyze nowadays, online is much more stronger. As Thomas mentioned, in Brazil, you have this mix, depending the region of the country. But I think that the tendency is online. Still, our region, as Chuck said, the cash is king, so many people still use it. But you also have some methods that allows you this. But in terms, if you see how the regulations are coming and the reality of the markets, everything is focused to online. I don't see a huge strength in retail model nowadays to be supported in many of the countries where they are trying to regulate or not. This is what I see.
Perfect. And that leads me, and it's interesting, right? I do share your belief as well. Just like I think it's the retail is a gateway it's a current necessity, it's a current reality, and it's something that eventually the better operators that understand the dynamics of the market of the industry will know how to migrate, progressively within their company profile, just like into the online space, and which leads us, to the issue of, how do you build that, right? Because I mean, just like you can have the great tech, you can have the great product, you can have the great team, you can have all these great on what it is that you're building, and why, even your market research, right? Which is like, but at the end, if you don't have adequate payment solutions, right, and effective, adequately payment solutions, you're going to make a very negative impact, right? So just like, let's just shift it a little bit into what effective payment solutions are, how they look like, and what does that mean? Just like, it's to make sure that we're actually, just like, it's capturing, just like that experience, to the satisfaction of the customers. So I'll jump, to you, Juan, as was, just like, it's obviously, I'm sure you face, different challenges in different countries with different payment solutions. Just like, how has it been for you? What has been the good, bad, and the ugly, right? And just like, it's in the payment solution ecosystem.
Yeah, I think we have like a gold rule that a player wants, once they deposit, they want their money in a second, and once they want to withdraw, they want in 1 minute as much. So because it's the culture of the players. I remember that when we started, didn't exist the actual aggregators that I will call. So basically, was really tough because you need to negotiate each payment independently and to explain what you are doing, maybe in some environments that were still not regulated. If you ask me, the best method we have in the region is Pix, by far, in Brazil. Is for sure Thomas can explain much better than me, but what they found there is something amazing. And nowadays, some countries will use the code to copy. But in the rest of the region, I think some companies, some aggregators, basically what they did is they try to get the best methods in each country. With one integration, basically you can give to your players, let's say 5 to 10 different possibilities to deposit. Also in the industry, we have seen some acquisitions of these aggregators. But what I see the biggest challenge nowadays is the withdrawals. I think still the withdrawals is something that is not fluid, still have some bottlenecks. I don't see any aggregator that could find a proper solution. And the other main issue that I find in my operation is fraud. So basically, when you have certain fraud, that the aggregator can be flexible and fast enough to allow you or allow us as an operator to react fast. Because as I mentioned, they are aggregators and they are in the middle of another one. But payments improve, I would say, in the last 3 years was exponential, the growth. And I think that in the different markets, you can find proper solutions to give some quality methods to the players. So we still need to improve a lot, but I don't feel that we are in a bad position nowadays.
Perfect. And Jack, obviously, I mean, just like as a B2B, you have, just like it's a plethora of PSP options, right? I mean, just like, how do you tackle this issue to make sure that you're providing that quality that your B2Cs expect of you?
Well, this is it. I mean, as a B2B and as a platform provider, I mean, if I talk just for us, for example, we're currently operating in maybe 2-3 continents, so we're not even global. And I'd say at the moment we have upwards of the high hundreds in terms of numbers of PSPs we have integrated, because each territory brings its own demands. Just alluding to what Juan said as well there with Pix, that obviously was a huge game changer for Brazil. I mean, it's been around for 2 years now, but just the ability to then have that to be able to tap into a certain area of the market and give people access to actually be able to move money around freely and quickly was of huge importance. I think from our perspective, we almost look at PSPs as a unique selling point. I think certainly if you go into different regions where you do have localized PSPs, those are what players will certainly look for. If you're running an operation and it's hard to deposit and withdraw money, especially in LatAm, for example, which is, as we know, is highly demanding in terms of what they expect from a service, even given it's in its infancy, then that for us is, we will always use that as a point of sale to say, look, we have X amount of PSPs, we have X, Y, Z. And just be able to use them as an option that when a player logs in, they know straight away that they're going to be able to get their money in and out, and move their money around freely as they need to.
Perfect, love it. I mean, just like and interesting, right? And just like Thomas, I would like to get obviously your perspective in Brazil. Just you have picks, as it has been mentioned. Just like we've listened to Jack, of what Sportingtech is doing. Just like and how they're providing basically that fluid experience. But just like, what is your view in this, and how operators can be successful when it comes to effective payment solutions?
Sure, thank you, Kim. And yeah, I think there's been great insights provided by Juanjo and by Jack as well. I 100% agree with them. Of course, as a Brazilian, and we Brazilians, we're very proud of the system called Pix, because it has, to a certain extent, revolutionized the speed at which we can make financial transactions, bank to bank, CPF to CPF, account by account to account. Before Pix, we used to have instant bank transfers. They were called instant bank transfers, but they were not that instant. And we had Boleto as well, which was a bit of a nightmare for customers and for us when it comes to settlements, when it comes to fraud, when it comes to processing time. So yeah, but I need to provide a bit of an insight here, input, because of course, again, we're very proud about Pix and the way it works. It's very effective. I know of many other Latin American countries wanting to copy the Pix model. However, I don't know how many of you have heard about something called M-Pesa or Pesa in Africa. They've been running instant payments for almost 10 years now. And like Tanzania, Kenya, South Africa, they all have the Pesa system, which is very similar, or in my opinion, even better than Pix. In some cases, in Tanzania and Kenya, I know we're here analyzing Latin America. I understand the focus. However, just putting this into perspective, because at the same time that I agree with Juan, when it comes to, yes, COVID brought a bit of a tech benefit to Brazil and Latin America, because I share the same sentiment there, Juan, that I always felt like South America was almost like 10 years behind the rest of the world. But at the same time, I think sometimes we forget bringing Africa and some other Asian markets into the equation as well when it comes to comparing. Because if we look at these cases now for Pesa, for instance, you don't even need a bank account, which in some cases might not be the safest thing to do. You transfer money from a cell phone to another cell phone. All you need is a cell phone number. And this poses a lot more issues as well here for us in Brazil. Kim, I don't know if you're aware, the number of crime, financial crime, hijacking as well has increased a lot ever since the insertion of Pix in the market. It is a fantastic method, yes. However, along with an evolution, along with the development of anything, there needs to be education as well. And I think we Brazilians, although we're dealing with a massive, fast-paced, highly evolved financial system, banking system, our population, even though highly exposed to the internet or to mobile web penetration, we're not necessarily aware of the dangers out there. And it's very often to hear a Brazilian falling victim to a financial crime, losing all the money they had in their savings account, getting hijacked, in some cases it even ends the worst possible way. So education is key as well. I'm just doing a very broad analysis here because, again, Pix works fantastically well. At this stage, you wouldn't be able to run a sports betting operation without the integration of Pix. I know many partners here in Brazil that offers that solution as well for Brazil and similar solution for other Latin America markets. Agreeing with Juan as well, withdrawal is a problem. We need to find a method. And I think there's a massive opportunity in the market there for new startups or business to come up with solutions that will be able to pay at the same speed as well. So I know also Jack is in constant touch with technical or tech providers coming from Brazil, because they're constantly, as a platform, they're looking for solutions to be integrated onto their platform so that they can subsidize it to their platform customers. But yeah, doing a broad analysis, that is my view. I think there's a lot of opportunity there from a fintech perspective. It's not by chance that almost every day you see new fintechs and new payment processing methods coming up in Brazil. On my LinkedIn, I get flooded, I get swamped with messages offering PSP for Latin America, which is not bad, but it just gives you an idea of what's happening in the fintech and the transaction finance world.
Perfect, Thomas. I mean, and I think you lead us perfectly into in next topic that I want to just like maybe rephrase it or reframe it, but it has to do with basically benchmarking, right? I mean, just like Latin America has grown basically on the back of global standards or benchmarks, and it's just like, and for lack of better words, operators, seasoned operators that come into LatAm with standards, just in their region where they've been successful, and they've come in and basically, just like it's grown through executing those standards. But if we flip basically the coin and look at how Latin America has apported to the global just like view on what are we creating and what are we offered the industry from Latin America as far as potentially new benchmarks that could be adapted in other parts of the region. Just like rather than going extensively, just like into an open discussion, just like if each of you could provide maybe one or two of those maybe highlight opportunities that we're doing better or we've adjusted or modified and created this benchmark that can be utilized as a standard barrier for maybe some of the other regions. Are there any such in mind that can come up, to where they say this, it's been this way in other parts of the world. We've taken it, we've adjusted it, and we've perfected it. Just like, do we have some of those benchmarks in Latin America? Just like to you, Jack.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is where LatAm's. I think if you look at other continents, let's say North America, for example, they very much just embraced the European way when the European market decided that this was the next best place to be. So you saw European operators go like the wind to get there, basically, and be first to market to try and have their stamp of market share. I think if you look at LatAm, they've almost pushed back. I think you don't really see some of the European heavyweights, apart from a couple, that have really gone down there and made great headwinds. And I think the reason being is that Latin America is far less accepting of something that doesn't necessarily cater to their needs and their demands. That's why I think we're starting to see that now, especially I think from our perspective, and I talk widely about the competition as well in general, when you're seeing established technology providers in the B2B space that are going into these markets, and this alludes to what I said earlier, if you give the operator the flexibility and the technical ability to be able to create something using their local knowledge, then you do create quite an exciting proposition for the player, whether it be certain verticals, whether it be the PSPs integrated, the look and feel of the site, the convenience factor. It's all triggers that will engage players. And I think that's why we're now starting to see some of the maybe less previously established localized operators that have now been able to jump onto some enhanced technology, really make great strides and overtake some of the larger operators that perhaps thought that they would have it fairly easy. So that's probably my point, I would say, at this point.
I love your last comment, right? Because I think, just like, and I'm a firm believer in that too, where if those closer to the ground are understanding how Latin America works, you don't have to be a top five operator to be successful, right? You can come from the bottom and really climb up real fast. One, I want to get obviously your perspective on, how Latin America is trend setting with potentially new benchmarks, towards the industry, and obviously speaking from a global perspective, right? I mean, just like from your experience, right, from everything that you've done, obviously with the reading gaming and your experience, as you see Latin America evolving. Earlier you mentioned that your initial view is that LatAm was basically about 10 years behind, the rest of the world, or definitely Europe. And now you've seen it that basically, at least on the online part of it, it has evolved and basically scaled up and maybe almost caught up with some of the more historical markets. Just like, what are some of those benchmarks, or do you have any benchmarks particularly, just like that there are attention grabbers that you say that we can originate from Latin America as trend setting and potentially industry standards?
Great. I think the main thing that we can compare to Europe mainly is football. If you see statistics, bets on football is more or less 90%, 85%. That is pretty similar to European model. I think players started with really base bets, 1x2, but now players are starting to combine, and now you have bet builder. And I think there is a path that is trying to follow Europe. I remember one comment from Jack regarding international operators, or let's say the tier one operators, or the bigger players. The big difference I see is that when they come to the region, they come with big wallets. And they decide to come, and they have strong brands, but still they continue with their technology or their platform from Europe. And there I see some gap or some opportunity, because it's clear that if you want to use the same platform you use in other market in LatAm, for sure it will not work. Even I am Argentinian, I speak Spanish, and the Spanish I speak is not the same as Peru or Colombia or Mexico. And in the second, you recognize that I'm not from there. The other thing that I consider that we are a little bit different is in terms of online casino. And the type of promotions, the way that you can promote your games in the site, tournaments. We are a bit different. Maybe I make this experience from the land-based casino, but today you have a mix of people that already is playing in casino, in land-based casino, and maybe they like similar things what they experience there. And for sure you have the young generation that they are looking something different. But I don't feel that if you follow let's say the European model, I put Europe as an example because it's the longest experience we have here, no? Following the European model in terms of casino will work. In terms of North America, it's a really new market. American sports has a total focus. American sports works with a different margin. So it's another type of investment. So it's difficult to compare there. But in terms of benchmark, more or less, this is what I see and what I experienced in the last times.
And Thomas, let's get your perspective. I like to add one that I think just like should be interesting enough. But I want to hear your perspectives. Obviously, Brazil is a big market; it's a growing market. There's a lot of expectations. I'm sure there's a lot of different stakeholders in the ecosystem willing to come and do great things and maybe different things in Brazil, right? I mean, just like how do you see Brazil and LatAm as basically being trend settings and potentially new benchmarks?
Thank you. Well, I think sometimes we're not taken very seriously when we say LatAm is different or Brazil is different or anything is different, but there's a reason, and it is in fact different. Sometimes it might sound like we're just not serious about business by saying that, or we're trying to make things difficult, because I've heard that from foreign operators, which is not true. Where I've seen instances as well, Kim, where an operator the giant European operator, has not adapted and died. You know, the title of the panel, this discussion is Latin America Adapt or Die. And this has happened time and time again because people are stubborn. People are not willing to adapt their strategies to the local markets which they're targeting. And I think to provide you an answer when it comes to how do you benchmark, where do you take those benchmarks from? How do you know if your strategy or new strategy is going to become a benchmark or something to provide a north for yourself and for others, which will eventually copy you? I think a benchmark cannot be created. I think if a company is aware to the local needs, if a company like, let's use an example of a foreign operator, let's use an example of a Swedish operator wanting to come into Brazil, they need to adapt their strategy, their marketing strategy, their retention, acquisition strategy. They need to yes or yes, otherwise they will die. And this is where benchmarks come from, Kim. We don't come up with them. We listen to the market. The target audience are the ones who provide us inputs and insights for what becomes benchmark. If we look at Bolão, if we look at some forms of sports betting in Brazil, those are benchmarks. Benchmarks become USPs, unique selling points. But those only come if we're willing to listen to our target audience and adapt our strategies accordingly.
Perfect. I mean, just I will add one that I think it requires, just like a lot of thought, beyond obviously, just like, and maybe potentially lead into another roundtable, right? But it has to do with price discovery, just like, and here's what I mean. We have in Europe, we have in North America, a benchmark of basically, 5%, give or take a little bit of margins, revenue margins. When we look at Latin America, those margins in just about every country are significantly higher, right? So there's a higher tolerance from the market itself, from the players themselves, to accept that, just like it's the 8%, 9%, even beyond the 10%. So is there something there that we as operators or as stakeholders in this ecosystem should be looking at to see if there's a potential new way of looking where added revenues could come from, and basically looking at the discovery phase on creating that standard, right? So just like it's just food for thought in the sense that I think that's it's very it's a lot different, it's a lot higher, just like, and maybe something that should be looked more in depth. But I want to just like, rather than going deeper in that direction because of the time constraints, just like I want to focus on, I think, on a broader perspective that has to do with regulation. Just like we initiated this roundtable talking about the ever-changing environment on what each country represents, in its current state, in its previous states, and even in its future state of potentially adjusting its regulations. So just want to go around and just like it's the panel and lead it off with you, Juan. Just like obviously as an operator, you get boots on the ground. Just like it's you're living it day in day out in several countries. What is regulation? Just like what's it meant for you? Just like it's from an execution perspective, right? I mean, just like, has it allowed you to add resources, hold back on resources, just like restrain yourself from expanding as aggressively as initially thought, or maybe the other way around? Just like what impact does regulation have in each of the the businesses ecosystems that you guys are engaged in, and how do you see it for the industry as a whole?
Well, first of all, if we see whole LatAm, the only market with a proper regulation for online gambling is Colombia. That they decided to create a specific regulation for our business. The second one will be Peru, that it is supposed, there is a law and the regulation would come fortunately in December. But the rest, in my opinion, are adaptations, or the country itself is complicated. Let's say Argentina, gambling is per state, but Argentina is not United States, so you have really small states that is not has no worth to invest there. You have two provinces, Buenos Aires and the city of Buenos Aires, which has a proper regulation, but when you analyze the whole frame, maybe the business is tough, and then you have limitation of amount of licenses that then we can discuss it. Brazil, we all know you have a law, but it's a law that was adopted from a lottery law, that the 12th of December, you have the 4 years till we are waiting the regulation. For sure, Thomas will explain better than me. But again, it's just for sports betting and it's an adoption of a lottery law. Then Mexico, you can work under the same permission of gambling from the land-based casino operators. So if you see the region as a whole, you don't have proper regulations specific for our business. I think that the gaming commissions or the regulators, what they try to do is they see an opportunity. They say we need to regulate this because it is a possibility of taxes. And some of them adapt it, like Colombia or Peru, and some others, okay, they try to find a way to have something. In my personal opinion, my first market was Colombia when the regulation there was a draft. And unfortunately, I always congratulate Colombia because they took the leadership, but at the same time, they make a regulation that is so hard that the investments that you need to do to start in the market makes that some operators didn't start it, or a lot of operators broke. Nowadays, you have a market of 17 regulated operators, and let's say 2 or 3 has 85% of the market share. For sure, these operators made their investments and risk, but also at the same time, if I compare this regulation and mainly the technical requirements with Europe are much more higher, and these are barriers that limit the possibility when someone decided to invest in the market or not. We have markets like Chile that is discussing a lot after this boom, after some operators decided to sponsor first team leagues. Similar situation that happened in Brazil, that you watch a match from the first league and all the teams has a betting company as a sponsor, and everyone say, what is happening here? But I think in terms of regulation, is still making its first steps. Personally, I would like that every country has a proper regulation that allows all of the companies that are willing to invest to be there, to have a concrete frame, to have a concrete taxation, to have limitation from the companies that are not willing to operate there and wants to work offshore. And once you have a proper frame that everyone can decide, okay, I get there or I don't get there. But to be in the middle is a problem, because when the competition is not fair, it's difficult to make planifications, it's difficult to organize what to do, what not to do. So I think the regulation is the biggest opportunity that the region has. But I think that that is on the way. It's on the way. If we have this conversation as we have in Corona, that we have a lot of these kind of conferences, it was only Colombia. The rest was gray areas or middle regulation like Mexico. So from that point of view, I think that the still regulators needs to do a little bit more to put over the table a proper regulation for any operator that would like to come to the region.
Perfect. Let's get. I want to jump with you, Thomas. Just like obviously, just to see your perspective. We know that there is a regulation in Brazil, right? I mean, just since 2018, but there, just like it's, well, we know the political complications, right? I mean, just like, and that's probably, maybe not to the same extent, but endemic in Latin America, right? I mean, just like it's the interest to regulate has a lot of heavyweights on both sides, right? So just like we end up with that time issue and maybe a quality or an in-depth issue of what regulation should look like to invite, right, the heavyweight, the foreign investors or the local operators, right? And just like, what's the mean? I mean, from your point of view, give us your perspective on what do you see evolving, and how will it benefit, right, into the industry with the next 2-3 years?
Thank you, Kim. What we have in hand, and again, just want to agree 100% with Juan once again. I think by trying to copy a model of a country such as the United States into countries like Brazil and Argentina is a recipe for failure, because we just don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the logistical support, we don't have the IT support to make sure it works. We can't just bring the US shape or form and try to make it work here in Brazil and in Argentina. It's just not going to work. Now, what we have in hands for Brazil at this stand, Kim, is a presidential decree that has legalized sports betting and games of skills such as poker. However, when it comes to sports betting, we're still waiting for a final piece of regulation to be approved and enforced. That's for betting, for sports betting. When it comes to gambling, it's completely still deemed as forbidden. It's not allowed at all. We as operators, and myself as a Brazilian, we look at this with a lot of frustration, because it's a massive market. But at the same time, I need to say that it's better that people who know how to do it, and the agencies, the regulating boards or departments or the state or the politicians, I would prefer having people that really understand, they know what they're about to regulate, than rush to a final piece of regulation that will encourage a black market to come up, which was the case. And we saw this happening in Europe. We saw this happening in Portugal, where the regulation wasn't very well thought of. And then this just opened up room for black markets and operators to just, take an unfair ground and unfair advantage. We saw this in Mexico as well. I 100% agree with Juan once again. Mexico calls themselves as regulated, but I know there's so many operators in Mexico with a .com site, and they just can't stop, because they pop up overnight like this. So, and this is unfair to those with an MX, with a .mx domain, paying their taxes, doing the right thing as per the regulation, having to compete with an operator with a .com license, with a .com domain. So at this stage, as much as I am waiting anxiously for the regulation in Brazil, I also prefer waiting for the right regulation to come about. Right, meaning fair for the businesses, for the players, for the country when it comes to generating tax, employment, and all this. As for Brazil, the current status is there's been a lot of rumors and hearsay that's going to regulate this year. I do not believe so. That's my personal take, because I understand more or less the political game in Brazil, how it goes, who depends on what, who's back. And based on that, I don't believe it's going to happen this year.
Jack, obviously, you're in a very unique position to where, as a B2B, you offer services into these different countries that are constantly regulating, or adjusting the regulations. It's just like so you're definitely a stakeholder. It's just like, as you put in risk the quality of your services if you're not on top of everything that is going on, right? So, which forces you to really be, just like, it's on the forefront of all of this. What kind of unique challenges, just have you had in basically looking forward? How are you prepared to deal with basically these inundation of potential, ongoing, just like regulation?
Sure, yeah. So both guys have made some good points already. I really just want to add on to them. So for us, obviously, our compliance team is expanding all the time. We're completely engaged, given the number of regulatory changes that we're expecting to come up in the next 6 to 12 months in LatAm. I think if you look at one of the previous questions, we were talking about benchmarking. That's something that I think that these countries can kind of lean on. I know obviously the US is very stringent and perhaps isn't the way that people want to go, but that we've got a global market here where there are many regulated markets, and some of them work very well. So I certainly believe that there are aspects or maybe certain factors that some of these countries should be looking at, and seeing what works, and perhaps what doesn't work, and then implementing them in a fair way. It's also worth pointing out, like, obviously, as Juan said, Colombia, they've kind of gone a route where they've made things very difficult for the local operator. I think, as Thomas said as well, you need to create a fair regulation that allows these businesses to thrive. Colombia, where it's so expensive, for example, that's now a market that you would say is an easy market for companies with money and probably the European heavyweights to tap into, because they're happy to come with this huge bankroll and spend that money. But what you've essentially done is it's a toss up between money and opportunity. So let's say you end up with an influx of European operators operating in a market. You're then essentially ruling out the opportunity for things like creating jobs, opportunities within the country, being able to give back to community, the way that some of the lotteries operate in Europe and around the world. So it's kind of having that balance of money against opportunity. I think there's also, you look in some of the other territories like Argentina, for example, where you just have Buenos Aires currently operating. I'd imagine after the emphatic win for Saudi Arabia the other day and some of the neighboring provinces seeing the money rolling in there for operators in Buenos Aires, they'll be obviously looking at their own regulatory purposes as well. So it is an interesting time, but I think that the key thing to say is it has to be fair, and you have to have this balance of opportunity and money as well.
And I think, wrapping it up, we opened up this session talking about the opportunity as far as the growth, just like it's the size of the market. So obviously there's a lot of interest. The who's who in gaming is in Latin America at some degree or another. Just like and some of them have been there cautiously for a long time. Some of them have been just recently, just like cautiously understanding all this that we're talking about. So as we look forward, just like, I don't believe there is a perfect, cookie cutter, copy paste type of model, because of the complexity that we're talking about, right? From regulation, from product offer, from basically just like everybody in the ecosystem, So from understanding how Latin America is, and there's an interested investor, whether it's a local LatAm, expanding into the region, or an international investor coming into LatAm. Just like one thing is for certain, just like this type of forums, just like there's no way that you can be successful if you choose to go at it alone, right? I mean, just like there's a lot of us in the ecosystem that are here willing to offer a hand. I mean, it's a bit of interest in all of us to make sure that anybody that wants to invest into Latin America comes in successfully, does it. Just like there's a lot of individuals, a lot of companies, just like a lot of us that have done it. A lot of us that help companies, navigate through all of this that we've talked over this last, just like 45 minutes or so. So I think, this, just like it's a great opportunity for all those that are looking to be successful, either to reframe their success and, just like, and understand how to restructure their footprint into Latin America. Just like, I would say that, just like, at least from my perspective, and obviously, just like I know that it's extended from you all as well, just like we're here to make the industry successful, right? If the industry succeeds, whether it's pitching in at the regulatory perspective, whether it's at the commercial, whether it's at the operational, just like we offer, just like a unique voice in making sure that all of those that have an interest, come in and basically execute as they would want to, with the resources that they know that could be available, So from my end, just I want to thank the three of you, just like I enjoy listening to you, just like I definitely got some very unique and fresh perspectives into what each of you have commented, just like, so I thank you three, thank you IGF for the opportunity for having us on board.